This training lesson will cover the topics of radio buttons and checkboxes. For the purposes of this training lesson, we'll go ahead and create a couple of variables. And we'll create a long integer variable to use for our condition, which will be our radio button. And we'll create another variable for our checkbox. These are both integer values. And we'll create a new dialog. Actually, we'll create an entire new procedure. And within this procedure, we'll create a new modal dialog box. From our entry point, we'll navigate to our modal dialog box, and within this dialog box, we'll add a checkbox. We'll give it a name. And we can give it a caption. And of course, it only makes sense to use a checkbox for a database column or a flat file field that only has two possible values, a yes, no, on, or off. In this case, we'll make it new or not new or used. And we'll collect that into our variable called status. Now at runtime, if the user checks the box, the variable that's associated with that checkbox, in this case status, will have a value of 1. If it's left unchecked, then the value in status will be 0. Now radio buttons are used for where you need to have more than two possible values. So we'll go ahead and put 3 radio buttons onto our window, onto our modal dialog box. And this can be our first condition. Let's say that's new. And we'll call this radio 1. We'll call this radio 2. Its condition can be used. And for our third, we'll call the condition broken. So again, you only use radios if there's more than two possible values. The important thing to understand about the radio buttons is that the first radio button in a group of radio buttons needs to have the attribute set for group, while all the other ones within that group need to have that group attribute turned off. And the variable is only associated with this first radio button. So we'll go ahead and select our variable called condition. Now if the user selects the first radio button at runtime, then you'll get a value of 0 in condition, and the second radio button will cause a value of 1 to be written in condition, and then a value of 2 if the third radio button is selected. You'll notice that if you click on any of these other radio buttons, you don't have a variable associated with them. That's because they are linked to the first radio button. Now if you need to come back and add a radio button later, you do need to be conscious that the layout, and I'm going to go up here to the layout and show the tab order. And so the tab order is important. You need to have all of your radio buttons in sequential tab order. To set the tab orders for a dialog box or a modal window, you simply click on the controls in the order that you want them to be tabbable. So in this case, we'd click on the first one, and then on the 3 radio buttons, we just need to make sure that we click on them in sequence. And that's really all that you need to know about the checkboxes and the radio buttons.